We are here with Angie Lau, Editor-in-Chief, Founder and CEO of Forkast.News. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
So a lot of our members do know your story, but for some of us that are a little bit new, how would you describe your journey entering journalism, and how would you tell a little bit about that story for us so far?
The backstory, right, Rebecca? I get it.
Backstory, yes.
When I was 2, I'll fast forward a couple of years there. No, really, it started as, a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed 16-year-old who wanted to, run into the world, but didn't know exactly what role I would be playing in it. And I had an extraordinary English teacher who, as I was having my angst moment of, what should I do? What should I pursue? And he said, have you ever thought about journalism? And the moment that escaped his lips was when I knew that this was my calling. And why do I say that? It spoke to everything. First of all, I never gave myself permission to even think about it. But secondly, once it was mentioned and somebody saw me in that role, it validated for me everything that I'm really passionate about, which is understanding the world better, curiosity, wanting to understand and then communicate and educate, and a community, an audience about stories, the importance of storytelling. I got to be a busybody, a paid busybody, and ask nosy questions, but for the greater good. And I certainly saw the value of journalism from a very young age. As an immigrant child in Canada, we were learning alongside my parents. My parents were learning alongside us as we traversed this journey in Canada together, and we didn't really know until we learned. And there were certainly many instances in which I saw when we didn't know, we were then vulnerable. And I learned from a very young age that knowledge is power and that knowledge can empower. And so I've carried that DNA with me my entire career and right into Forkast. I got into broadcast journalism because those are my skill sets. I'm a visual storyteller. I love writing, I love reading, and I love telling stories, and I love communicating. And I think that all of those facets really play well into broadcast journalism. And so, I started my career in Canada. I worked for ABC and Bloomberg in the US, and then that took me to Hong Kong, where my last gig before Forkast was the anchor for Bloomberg Television, based in Hong Kong, as one of the anchors with my own show, and that was my role for many years. But the one thing that really drove me to continue beyond Bloomberg and to really embrace this role fully is to be in service to an audience. And in that way, this is why I founded Forkast.News, because right now, when it comes to technology, blockchain, cryptocurrency, distributed ledger technology, quantum technology, AI, 5G, IoT, all of these emerging technologies, there's a little bit of dissonance right now. There's a lot of noise, and there aren't a lot of credible or journalists that look like me or look like us, frankly, Rebecca, or have our pedigree, or have our credibility, or have our experience, who are necessarily in this space. And so I saw a business opportunity, but more important, I saw a need to serve an audience, and that's what drove me here. One of the people that is most important to me in my audience, and the one who truly inspired me to really embrace my role now here, is my little boy, and he's now 3 years old. But this idea, the seed, really started when he was born. And I wanted to remain relevant to him. And I recognized that he is of a generation, as are all of we, that will be disrupted by technology. And if you don't understand it, you will never see your place in the future. And so my role as a mother, as an editor-in-chief, as a founder, and as a communicator is to simply communicate and explain the story of technology. And if you can understand it, perhaps you will also see your place in it. And that for me was a very important job, and one that drives me to this day.
Wow, that's quite a fascinating story. And currently, it's been a little over a year since you started Forkast.News. Uh, could you tell us a little bit about what sort of conscious decisions that you've made when you built this newsroom, building up on all the years of journalism you had in the past? Things like running the newsroom, picking out who is best fit to not only staff but also run sort of a beat that's frankly quite different from what traditional newsrooms are used to covering. Could you
No,
tell
you're
us a
totally
little bit
right.
about your decision?
You're totally right. It is very different, and the way that I run things is also very different. But I also come from um, a reaction to what standard or traditional newsrooms look like. Very hierarchical, very top down, and in some ways less diverse than we'd like. The way that our team came together was so organic and so lovely. It, it is as simple as just saying, here we are, here's what we're doing. And people literally found us. We didn't always need to go out and, put a big job bulletin out there. I mean, this is a very organic thing. And as you know, startup organizations are very scrappy, but at the same time, it takes a certain person and it takes a certain personality to want to contribute to that. And I really regard my team as co-investors, in that they're investing their time, their energy, their passion into the company. And it is my job as a CEO to support their work and to create a viable and sustainable business that celebrates and amplifies the work that we are collectively doing together. For me, it was about finding and or the people who join our team share very similar attributes. They're enormously passionate, they're smart, they're dedicated, they're curious, all of those things. But more important to me was passion and commitment. It it mattered to me that if you don't know, you have the courage and the confidence to say, I don't know, and can you help me? And then being smart enough to actually go out and understand it and build on that knowledge. We are all in different stages of that. It's my job as editor-in-chief to really nurture that kind of environment where our team really feels not only nurtured, but absolutely supported to pursue some incredible stories and to do incredible work. At the end of the day, I think one of my strengths as an editor-in-chief and as the boss is to absolutely understand what truly drives a journalist, being a journalist myself, which is we just want to do good work, and we want to do it with integrity. We want to do it with dedication. We want to do it with quality, and that means sometimes we're going to invest more resources into a story, or the team will pitch in and get that story over the finish line, because that's what we're going to do together as a team. And then to amplify really great work for an audience. That at the end of the day is what a journalist wants. We all want to grow. We all want to be heard. We all want to keep learning. And that is exactly the newsroom that we are running here. And so it's not, it doesn't sound like, you know, you have to do X stories and that it must meet an X, you know, and here's the ROI and, you know, here are the key metrics, the KPIs that, you know, you have to meet. We just, you know, for me, it was very important. All of that stuff will happen. There's no doubt about that. What my job is to do is to make sure that the team is excited, is motivated, and you know, feel supported. And that's really the culture that we are grooming at Forkast.
And I got a chance to delve a little bit into Forkast as well last year. I do have to say that it is a great culture. You do appear to be taking care of the team quite well, and you've been growing quite a little bit as well. Um, you know, you're quite big for a newsroom that's only a little over a year. But also the topic that you're covering, Forecast is focused on emerging technologies, but currently now starting with the blockchain and the DLT topics. Given everything that's going on in the world right now, how do you put that sort of spin to your newsroom? I mean, I do see that you mention it a lot in your newsletters, and you try to cover it quite a bit, but how do you approach this topic?
So the topic of
Uh,
what's
the
happening in the world
pandemic
around
of a
us.
recession,
Absolutely.
yes.
Absolutely. Look, you know, technology is an incredible metaphor for change,
Mm,
isn't it? It's a
yes.
metaphor for change. And now the world around us is changing at speeds that, you know, one day we're safe, the next day we're all shelter in place. It's literally that fast. And that also means that every company that exists today is also being disrupted. And they're also now hungrier than ever to embrace and to think about technology. There was a study that was released about 2 years ago where 80% of global firms reported that they are in some stage of digital transformation. You can be sure that post-COVID, that number is closer to 100%. And the reason is because we're all in this shared experience of pandemic and disruption. And we're also seeing companies completely restructure and redefine out of, it's an existential crisis that we're all facing. And so you either lean into change or the alternative is, for me, unacceptable. And I think for companies who have not yet figured it out, that extinction, we're seeing it around us. But those who are leaning in and recognizing that what our value proposition was yesterday is not necessarily what it is today, and what are the skills and possibly the technology that we need to embrace that transforms our business in a way that our customers require and need. I think that that attitude has absolutely exponentially grown. And at Forkast, we are in the position to provide that knowledge, that education, and that interesting conversation about all of these emerging technologies that you may not have been aware of for your business. But all of a sudden, you know, to see it in the industry that either you're in or the industries that are adjacent to you, and to learn how other companies are thinking differently. And now is absolutely the time to embrace change because it's landed in all of our labs and it's not going away. And so, you know, it's similar to that saying, you know, it doesn't matter how many times you fall. The most important thing is how you get up. And right now, every company is forced to have these conversations, and Forkast is there for them. And so this is how we are leaning into disruption. One of the key things about Forkast is that, you know, we tell the story of technology through its impact at the intersection of business, economy, uh, and politics. And, and so we have to be empathetic to our audience. We have to understand what the needs are, what the desire to know about what is. And so to remain relevant in that conversation means to not report from or in a vacuum, but absolutely we're in the world, and we are seeing what's happening, and obviously the pandemic is a huge part of that. There's the list is as long as my arm of all the things that are on all our minds right now, regardless of where you are in the world. And so it's important to us to, first of all, understand what our audience's needs are. And then secondly, to be an advocate to our audience and to be in service to our audience when it comes to this technology conversation.
Right. And definitely all industries are changing, and what's not exempt for it is a media industry, which has been sort of forced to evolve for years now. And I think we feel that even more accelerated now. I'm curious to know about what you think about where this industry is going, and if there is a young journalist that is about to enter the workforce, and they're suddenly this is what they're entering into. How would you, if you were in their shoes, approach the situation? How would you find the opportunities, uh, as you skillfully have with your current situation? But how would you pinpoint what they should look for, what they should keep an eye out for? How would they approach the unknown? How does one begin to digest all this and take a step into that?
Sure. It's all about mindset, Rebecca. You know, it's what Charles Dickens wrote in his classic. It was the best of times and it was the worst of times. And quite frankly, that is the age in which we live. And that has not changed. That will live. The truth of that phrase will live with us our entire lives. It was the best of times and it was the worst of times. And so when I talk about mindset, it is about how excited are you to actually not know, to actually dive into the unknown. How comfortable are you in your discomfort, in being uncomfortable? How adaptable are you? How flexible are you? How tenacious are you? These are the true skill sets that will distinguish two journalists, one who have these characteristics and one who might not. And I know who I would bet on every time. And really it boils down to attitude. You know, if you know that it is amongst the best of times, also the worst of times at the moment. You know, when you take a look at the headlines and you take a look at the layoffs that continuously plague this entire industry, when you take a look at the diatribe and the rhetoric and the vitriol that is launched against, you know, journalism itself, you know, it's pretty debilitating. And or the best of times. Why do I say the best of times? I just launched a startup, a media platform with, you know, with the technology and the barrier to entry, the cost has been reduced to a point where we can run a decentralized team around the world via our laptops, via technology. You know, could we have done this 20, 30 years ago? It would have taken a whole lot more resources. And so it's about also being creative about what we do have, what the tools are in our hands. And, you know, I think that for any young journalist is to keep an eye out for those opportunities. My entire career, I have, in the most chaotic moments, were the moments that I snuck my way in a little bit more, you know, edged up a little bit higher, because I was willing to have those conversations that other people were nervous about having. I seized opportunities. Not only seized, created opportunities. And you have to do that. I think, you know, the entrepreneurial spirit that is now reflected in what I do after a very traditional career in journalism, where, you know, get a job, do your job well, get promoted into the next job, get another job, la, 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 that ladder. For me, I was able to, in my opinion, get edge up. But the reasons why I edged up sometimes was hard work, obviously, but it was also recognizing the opportunity and how I could position myself to be helpful in a way that somebody did not think of me before. Does that make sense? When you present yourself in a new light and somebody accepts that from you, you've already created a new opportunity for yourself. Don't let anyone ever define your narrative or your story or your skill sets. You seize that narrative consistently and you own it. Don't ever give it away. It's that important.
Sure, and that's really great advice. Could you tell us a story perhaps that would sort of illustrate how you created an opportunity and how you use that mindset of elevating yourself, just as an anecdote, and also just to tell our listeners a little bit more, make it a little bit concrete for our listeners to see how they can do it themselves, perhaps?
Sure. I'll share one really easy story because it's an experience that everybody will have in their career. So I was working in a newsroom and suddenly my boss was replaced and now I have a new boss. And so I now have a new news director. And obviously that is a time that is really nerve-wracking for a lot of people in the newsroom, because, you know, the news director has hiring and firing powers. They can like you or they can dislike you, and it's, you know, enormously subjective sometimes in broadcasting. You know, sometimes you think you're doing great work, and if somebody doesn't agree, and it's, you know, it's in their purview to make that decision, your fate is completely in this new person's hand. And so, of course, you know, the entire newsroom politics, office politics structure is based on a boss that no longer is there, and now comes a new boss, completely unknown entity to all of us, right? For me, you know, and I, believe me, I mean, the buzz in the newsroom and, you know, the concerned conversations, etc. For me, I thought, here's a new person. What might that feel like? I used my skills as a journalist, and I placed my thinking. I was using my empathy skills. What must it feel like to be a new person, to be in charge of a new staff, and you're new to the city and you're supposed to be the boss? You know, I think I just really appreciate a friendly hello and you know, assistance of help, and I think that would be really nice. And that's literally what I did. I mean, maybe it was a little presumptuous of me, and certainly a little nerve-wracking, but I walked up to the top floor of the news station and to the executive offices, and I just very casually knocked on the door and introduced myself, and basically, you know, welcomed and then gave the lay of the land, and you know, obviously, oh, here's a person, here's one of my reporters who I should get to know. And so out came a very lovely conversation. And because he was in that mindset of wanting to learn and explore, you know, and suddenly, you know, you know, he's asking me about what my perspectives were, you know, the community, and you know, I I basically said, look, I think there's an enormous opportunity for this station to, and then I got to put on my entrepreneurial hat. You know, there's an, if you're asking me what I would do, here's what I would do. And it was a time when Ohio was at a critical juncture for the elections. It was a battleground state. And, you know, I said there was an extraordinary opportunity for our station to distinguish itself. No other station was doing some, you know, dedicated teams to politics and to the election from a local level. A lot of the stations depended on national coverage. And I said, I think, you know, I think we should lean into this before lean in was actually a word and or a thing. And I said, and if you ask me, I would dedicate a reporter to cover the Democrats, and I would dedicate a reporter to cover the Republicans, and that would be the beat for the next couple of months. That's just one idea. He loved it. And guess what I did? I was one of those reporters. I certainly was. So, and that's just one simple example that, and you can imagine what that spawned into, right? Because I was more high profile, I got bigger assignments, and then people thought of me differently. And when people think of you differently, because you've expanded their perception of you, even though you have been this way all, you know, yeah, you just make sure that you prove that you can do your job powerfully, and that in of itself will give you the opportunity and the leverage to seize opportunities and create opportunities. So that's just one tiny example.
That's a great example, and I think definitely our listeners and our AAJ members can learn a lot from that. Lastly, just to round off this conversation, do you have any words of advice for our AAJA members? Perhaps how they can interact with the organization better, what the organization can do for them? How can we together build a community for journalists who are we're just trying to do a good job? You know, how can we learn from each other a little bit better and move forward, especially during a time where change is, you know, something that we really have to lean into. Not to really use your words, but
if there was one grain of truth about success, it is that there are a lot of people that contribute to it. For me, AAJA has always been that network of support, and frankly continues to be. Without this incredible network of journalists, without this incredible organization that continuously thinks about how we can support each other, come up with programming in which we can share our stories, come up with seminars and events and all of these things in which we can professionally grow and develop. This is what this organization, this is what AAJA is for its members. And, you know, full disclosure, I was the president of the chapter. And so you're speaking to the converted and you're speaking to an evangelical, okay? But I will say that for me, early in my career, I knew one of the things that was missing before I found AAJA was I felt very much alone. I felt very like, you know, the people that I could lean on were my mentors. But what was this bigger culture and community of journalists? What, you know, that this is a real community, and it behooves every one of us to support each other And quite frankly, my success would have been 50% less without the kind of support that I have experienced almost my entire career with fellow journalists. So it is critical. I remember my very first day at Ryerson. So this is the School of Journalism in Canada, infamously hard to get into. I remember the year that I got in, there were like 100 spots and 2,000 people applied, and I still have no idea why they picked me, but I'm glad they did, and
We're all glad they did.
thank you, thank you. But I still remember our first orientation day. They said, you know, your take a look to the left, right, you know, they're your classmates, and sure, they're competitors, but they're also allies. And you know, 5-10 years from now in the industry, it is these relationships, it's this network of people that you have around you that will distinguish your career. That's 100% true. And I'm truly grateful for the alumni that I get to call AAJA, because this is where I have found the people in my newsroom. This is how our team works together and has gelled together almost immediately. It is word of the way that our team came together at Forkast was very much word of mouth, very much word of mouth. And as a startup, you can't afford to make mistakes. It costs you money, it costs you time, but more importantly, it costs you growth. And so, you know, that's just a little example of the trust that we have in each other, and it will serve you well.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Angie. They were really great insights, and we hope to hear from you again soon.
Absolutely. I'm
All
always
right.
here.